China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin were caught on a hot mic through their translators discussing immortality on September the 3rd, just before a 70-minute showcase of military invincibility by Beijing. Watch.
Старше 70 лет. А сегодня говорят, что 70 лет – это еще ребенок.
Да, еще. Куря.
发展，人类的器官会不断的移植，甚至越活越年轻，甚至会长生不老。预测呢，
本世纪呢，可能未来可以活到150岁。
Flanked by North Korea's Kim Jong-un, all three of these men are dictators who will likely hold on to power for as long as possible, if not for life. But despite an eye-watering display of new superweapons to signal China's invincibility to the world, is Xi Jinping as invincible as Vladimir Putin is immortal? Joining us today are Cai Rongxiang, National Zhongzheng University Political Science Professor, also Hemant Lalari, Institute for National Defense and Security Research, Visiting Research Fellow, also retired US Air Force Foreign Area Officer specializing in irregular warfare and missile defense, and Zhixiang Xu, Institute for National Defense and Security Research Assistant Research Fellow. A very warm welcome to all of you on the show today. Now, in China's theatrical September the 3rd production, as Sky News puts it, the weapons took centre stage. In this show, we're going to take a deep dive on the weapons Beijing intended the world to see, starting with those that may not have been covered as extensively. But first, after the military parade, Chinese social media users compared it with Donald Trump's parade on June 15th, marking 250 years of the US Army, as well as the president's birthday. One Chinese user wrote, China's military parade, a showcase of national power. US military parade, a showcase of relaxation. Another user wrote that when compared to Trump's MAGA movement, we have to admit that China's parade is just too handsome and is embarrassing the United States. So, Professor Cai, let me come to you first. I guess the key question is not denying the Chinese, their national pride in that parade, but what's the difference between a parade and fighting a war?
Yeah, a parade is basically a way of a country to show off its military power and high-tech weapons, both to its own people and to other countries. So we can see missiles, tanks, and other advanced skills on display can make the army seem almost unbeatable. And also, it provides some psychological impact because if you try to watch thousands of soldiers march in perfect unison, like goose step, makes them look unstoppable.
Yeah. I mean, come on, why are people fooled into thinking that military parades, equals military strength? I mean, walking in goose step, how does that relate to actual warfare?
Well, first of all, it's ironic that the PLA uses goose stepping as a means to show off because goose stepping has been associated with the Nazis, and consequently, Taiwan has reduced that and gotten rid of that. One of the things that Secretary of Defense and former Secretary of Defense and Marine Corps General James Mathis said is the enemy has a vote. So in this case, there is no enemy at the military parade shooting at the military and having them to respond, and the participants and the audience are not getting shot at, which is completely different than a military parade.
So let's get to it in terms of the weapons. Firstly, to the Robo-Wolves. Here's a similar prototype earlier on the streets.
这只机器狗体重30斤，配备一个4D 超广角感知系统，在我们侦察任务过程中，它可以将侦察画面实时回传给指挥部。
So the big question is, to what extent can these dogs or wolves replace humans' boots on the ground in conflict?
This kind of robotic equipment is actually also, we can call it in a category called armored ground vehicle. But there are different type of armored ground vehicles. You can use track, you can use wheels, or something like that, like a dog, or to have for different for legs and so on. But I think the point is that this kind of technology is still not ready for a high intensive warfare. So first of all, this kind of equipment is using legs. And that is very vulnerable in very high intensive warfare if any kind of damage and so on during the combat.
The legs, did you say?
Yes, it will be very easy to be damaged and not able to continue the fight. And the other issue is about the battery, the power. So normally, this kind of equipment, I mean, nowadays, could only stand for maybe half an hour or a little bit longer. But all in all, you cannot just remove it from the battlefield shortly back to recharge, or even to maybe the soldiers could bring in some batteries in their tactical vest. But the point is that the more battery you carried, the less weaponry and equipment, other important things, or most important things for the soldiers. It might be helpful for some special missions like counter-terror or maybe some hostage rescue and so on. But for a high-intensive ground warfare, urban warfare, like the potential Chinese invasion toward Taiwan, that might be still not very useful nowadays.
Professor Tsai, from your analysis, would you agree that not really appropriate for war, maybe more appropriate for movies?
I don't think so, because you can use robots to sort of do some dangerous missions. So because robots don't feel pain, okay? So even they can go to some dangerous situations without hesitation, especially in the Taiwan's trade war. It would be terrifying if robots could carry out amphibious landing operations, that kind of stuff. So I don't think it's not real. I mean, you can use, because you don't want to sacrifice your soldiers, right? That's the main goal here. You want to use robots
so
to
they're
do
more
the
expendable.
jobs.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the thing.
Okay. Gemon, what's your take on that? I mean, we've seen footage of them having mounted sort of guns, rifles.
Yeah.
Could they be used in that aspect that Professor Tsai mentioned?
I think that, as my colleague from INDSR mentioned, that they're not ready for real full war combat. But I think that in the case of Taiwan, they could be used to deal with the civilian population as an intimidation or surveillance and tracking, watching people, making people comply if the PLA were ever to take any part of Taiwan.
And how do they get over the battery situation that Professor Chu?
Well, in a non-war zone where the civilian population isn't armed, and the military is controlling the population, they could control, for example, where civilians could go. They could prevent civilians from going to certain places, and if they're armed, they could shoot if necessary to keep civilians back. So, in other words, these would be these robo dogs would be used as auxiliary forces for the people's armed police, for example, in maintaining control over a population.
Okay.
When we are talking about robotic or unmanned vehicles, they are normally used in three ways. We always call it, 3Ds. That means they can use in some environments like dangerous, which means a lot of threats or enemies, landmine and machine guns and so on. Or dual, that means a very boring mission. The robotic equipment could conduct the same mission for maybe 10 hours or even longer, if possible.
Dual.
Dual, yes.
Dual,
I mean, just like the UAV could fly over, an area for maybe 10 hours or longer. But if that is a human pilot, of course, it's too much, boring, and people will get tired very easily. And also, of course, and also something like dirty. That means maybe nuclear or poison gas or some this kind of environment.
Harmful to humans.
Yes.
Yeah. Next, to laser air defense, China unveiled the LY-1 ship-based laser air defense system. We're showing the pictures on screen now. It doesn't look as exciting as a missile or robo-wolf, but this laser system represents a technological leap designed to neutralize Taiwan and the US's defensive strategy. So what is this leap? Why is it possibly one of the most important advancements that we saw on September 3rd?
Well, it might be important, but I'm not sure it's such a big leap forward. What it does is basically it disables electronics on enemy drones, or it could possibly blind pilots. But I'm not sure it will be able to do a lot of it because it has to maintain a constant presence on the target. It can't be moving around too much. So it has to maintain that. So like fighter jets are moving all the time. They're not predictable. Missiles coming in might be more predictable, which they could use in that case. So it is an important weapon, but it also has some drawbacks. Besides trying to keep it on the target, it also doesn't work well in bad weather.
I mean, people are calling it an energy weapon. How does that work? How is that different to armaments, artillery, guns, shooting?
Yeah, because they are most used against drones, small boats, or missiles, not fighter jets, like I can say, because fighter jets can move fast, right? So the thing is that it could damage, maybe or destroy some part, but in reality, hitting a fast-moving jet from far away is really hard. The U.S. has a similar stuff, but usually they try to sabotage drones or small boats.
Okay. Professor Xu, I mean, some of the analysis was saying was that this was significant because it's countering the anti-ship missiles of the US and Taiwan.
You'll be the laser weapons.
Yeah.
Of course, that is possible in the future, but currently we still don't need the detail of this kind of weapons laser system. Basically, it depends on the technology. If the laser technology is good enough, then maybe it will be much more. Have a higher efficiency than some similar systems. But currently, we know that, for instance, the United States, UK, Germany, and France is also developing similar laser systems.
Taiwan is also developing something.
Yes, but we still don't know the further details about that.
Right. Okay.
And of course, in some Western system, it's already enough to intercept some missiles. But about China, we still don't know. So.
And how does it work? I mean, what are the advantages of using energy weapons versus, as I was saying, artillery?
Comparing with machine cannons or even the missiles, the laser is of course quite cheap because every one single shot maybe costs just $1 US or and so on. So I mean, if you calculate the cost, but at the same time you need a lot of generators to support the power.
So it doesn't just take that from the vessel that it's on.
So. To put it on the vessel is maybe the most easier way to do because the vessels like aircraft carrier, destroyers, cruisers, and so on, they already have enough power to offer this kind of weaponry. So
it's basically unlimited artillery in that sense.
Yeah, but of course it still depends on the powers, the proportion of power systems of the vessel. If that could keep supporting the use of laser weapons, because in the near future there are a lot of different systems like rail guns and so on. Also needs very strong of the support from their power pack.
And in terms of, I mean, it's the speed of light. So they don't need to track this missile or whatever it is that's coming in. It just aim at it. But
it has to put enough power on the target to have an effect. Like a laser needs to be persistent on that same point enough to, let's say, melt the metal that it's trying to cut through or to cause a disruption on the missile. So the problem really is more in the air, to have these laser systems in the air, because as he said, they require lots of energy, and an airplane doesn't have enough energy necessarily to really have a strong, high energy.
But the consensus is you think it's very far off being effective in conflict?
Against anti-ship missiles, it'll be more difficult. But against drones, they tend to be slower, and you can track them better.
Right. Okay. So perhaps that they could counter the hellscape that the US and Taiwan are wanting to establish in the Taiwan Strait. Now, just to break up the weapons a bit, let's go to China's defense spending. Some experts believe the real amount China spends is double the amount Beijing releases. What we're showing here now is a chart showing comparative defense spend between the US and China, clearly showing China's steady advancing military investment. Professor Cai, we can see at the moment what China has achieved from the parade on September the 3rd. It might be shinier than it actually is, but we can see those new weapons, we can see the innovation coming out of them. And that's achieved on half or 2/3 of the budget that the US is spending. What kind of things would we be seeing if there was parity with the US?
Yeah, the real China military spending is like you say, like 300 to 400 billion US dollars, right? It's about 2% of GDP, but still way below the US. Over the next 5 to 10 years, if China beefs up spending, especially on high-tech weapons, its military could become much more capable regionally, narrowing the gap between US and China, right? Especially in the first island chain and the South China Sea area. So China is on track to become a peer competitor with the US, especially in the Indo-Pacific. So in international politics, we call this a security dilemma, right? It's to citizens trap, because it's the risk of a war that arises when rising power threatens to displace a status quo power US. So that's the scenario we are so worried about. Yeah.
Next, the so-called Loyal Wingman, China's first stealth aerial drone, which is AI-enabled and designed to accompany a manned fighter. Its primary feature is an extreme stealth flying wing. It's designed similar to the American B-2 stealth bomber. It is nearly invisible to modern radar systems, which means it could evade air defense systems and fighter jets. Guillermo, let me come to you. So is this probably the most technically advanced weapon that we saw?
Yes, I believe so, because of the importance of integrating not only two different weapon systems together, but it's manned and unmanned, man in the loop, autonomous, all these different things become extremely complicated. But before I go into that, I just want to mention two quick facts. China's defense budget in 2000 was $30 billion. Today, it's $250 billion. So that's about an 8.3 times increase, all right? U.S. budget in 2000 was $500 billion, $531 billion. And in this year, it's almost double that. So the U.S. has doubled its budget in defense. China has increased by 8 times. The rate is extremely different. Moving on to the Loyal Wingman, which is what your original answer was, they displayed that in the parade as the FH-97A, which is basically a robotic drone aircraft that's supposed to provide support to manned aircraft. So these aircraft can be used as additional weapons carriers. They can deliver weapons. They can also absorb, as you mentioned, the attack from anti-air systems from the ground or from the air. In other words, they're an additional adjunct to protect the manned aircraft. They can also be used for reconnaissance, to send ahead to see what the threats are, what's going on the ground. So there's a lot of aspects that these Loyal Wingmen can provide.
Right, okay. Professor Xu, do you want to add to that? Why is it so lethal? And also, presumably, there are US-Taiwanese equivalents.
Yeah, China is trying to offer, just as I mentioned before, let's try to offer a solution package to counter the Western military preparation, development, or the Taiwanese defense. So with the Loyal Wingman, that is also the same, very similar situation. So in the recent years, we are focusing on so-called asymmetric warfare. We are focusing on some lethal precision munitions, like air defense, missiles, or anti-ship missile, anti-tank missiles, and so on, to counter the larger platform, like a fighter jet, surface combatant, or maybe the tanks. But with the Loyal Wingman, even the elder Chinese war plan, like a J-16 and so on, which doesn't really have stealth capability, could still use those kind of drones to counter or to attack, to suppress the Taiwanese air defense, because that is stealth, and it can carry precision weapons and so on. So all these drones can engage the Taiwanese air defense in the first time and create a green or safe or so-called safe corridor for them to conduct the further attack. So that is, of course, more or less, I will say, we need to consider about that.
Oh, okay. And Professor Tsai, do you know about American equivalent and the progression of that?
The American has MQ-28 drones, Reaper, that kind of stuff. And Taiwan also, we have MQ-9B Sky Guardian, right? Yeah. But the most important thing is anti-drones weapons. because you are supposed to develop some jamming stuff and to sort of prevent or sort of to use radio or radar signals to disrupt the Chinese drones.
So Gemma, those laser air defense systems, we talked about the US's.
Right.
So can they target effectively this kind of drone?
This kind of drone is much more difficult to target because these are jet-powered drones, so they're like jet aircraft. They also are highly maneuverable. Many of them have stealthy characteristics.
Yep.
And some of them could fly, let's say, much lower altitudes. And so it's more difficult. Countering drones, especially air drones, is a very difficult business. As the Ukrainians and the Russians have found in their war, it's very difficult. Even small drones are difficult to take down. There could be other devices that could do that, but it's much more difficult. And the problem is as you use your capabilities against these drones, the air defense systems, then you deplete them against, and when the manned systems come and you don't have as much or you don't have any, then you're vulnerable. So the countering the drone problem is not a simple problem, and it requires a lot of technology to figure it out.
Let's move on to the next one. But staying on drones, this time a submarine drone. China unveiled the AJX-002, a torpedo-like underwater drone for the first time. This is a direct threat to the US Navy, whose primary advantage has always been its superiority in submarine warfare. The AJX-002 is a weapon designed to challenge that particular dominance. Professor Xu, how concerned should we be at this weapon?
I mean, of course, we also don't know a lot of information about that, but that reminds me also a Russian underwater drone called Poseidon. But that is actually a very large-scale and AI-enabled nuclear torpedo, we can call it that. Yeah. So this kind of Chinese drone might also be used in a similar purpose.
Give us some scenarios as well that how it would be used against Taiwan. Okay,
another area that they could do is deploy underwater mines.
Yeah.
And that would deny, for example, Kaohsiung. Could shut down the port in Kaohsiung, could shut down the port in Taipei, near Taipei. And so it could deny the ability of the ROC Navy from getting out of port, or if they do, they take the risk of getting a sea mine attack.
Yeah.
And so it can do lots of different things. Similar to a submarine, but without the cost of a human on board. And if they make enough of them, they can also help enforce a blockade against Taiwan.
So it's the stealth, but also the fact that the endurance is a lot more than a manned submarine.
Right.
So it could actually just be lurking there for months, already pre-positioned before any takeover?
I'm not sure about months, but it depends on the propulsion system. The propulsion system, I think, right now is diesel, which makes it limited, maybe a week or two type scenario before it gets refueled.
Okay. In our final section, let's go to China's arms exports. According to CIPRI, between 2020 to 2024, the most recent 5-year period, China accounted for 5.9% of global arms exports. That compares with the US's 43%, France's 9.6%, and Russia's 7.8%. Professor Tsai, G-Man in a previous show had said that this showcase was actually for China to drum up sales of its weapons. Do you agree with that? And why has the figure been relatively low for China?
Maybe their weapons are not that good. That's why. And also, they try to sell those weapons to the countries in the global south, right? Like Pakistan, Myanmar, and some African nations. So they try to build up some influence over there. But the thing is that only authoritarian countries, they buy their weapons. But actually, we know American weapons are much better, right?
Final question, Guémon. What would increasing those exports, so say if there were more countries, more either authoritarian countries or more, sort of third pole countries, if they started buying and that increase, that percentage of overall global exports in arms increased or doubled, what would that mean? How would that shift the balance of power?
I think it would indicate that the weapons that the Chinese Communist Party's PLA is developing have become better, and which means that they're more lethal, which means that they're more difficult for the U.S. and allied forces to deal with. So over time, as they develop technology, steal technology, borrow technology, they could get better. But there are some drawbacks, as you mentioned. First of all is the quality and reliability issue. The Chinese weapon systems are not good. Although they look nice on a parade ground and they're very sparkly and shiny, they don't necessarily work as well as they are sold to be. Also, an important aspect of weapons is after you sell the weapon, you maintain it. And they have poor support for their weapon systems after they sell it. And I think the last 2 points is those weapon systems have hardly ever seen combat. So until they see combat, they're not going to get the sales that they need. So unfortunately, the only way that you sell things is by having a war, which demonstrates your capabilities, and you also improve them.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Cai Rongxiang, Gematlanari, and Juxie Xu, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe. See you next time.